So my first question actually is to you, Harold, as the standard setter, GRI. Remind us of the direct benefits of disclosure, because I definitely get the feeling that with all the sort of weight of compliance, and I wonder if we managed to mention the omnibus in this discussion, but we'll see. Kind of, with the sort of demands of compliance, and then with the uncertainty around the demands of compliance, we might forget why we're doing this in the first place. So why are we doing this in the first place?
Well, let's first start with saying disclosures is nothing, because disclosure, what does it mean? But let's say if it's standardized disclosures on sustainable reporting, that's what GRI is doing, then the benefits, transparency. Transparency for your workers, transparency for your customers, transparency for your suppliers or the one you supply to. And that's why companies also invest in this. So I would say it's even beyond reporting. It's sustainability is about innovation. It's about attracting new employees. It's attracting easier your investments, your money. So that's why that's what it's about. It's a tool. And of course, it's very helpful in this very difficult area where we're in now, that it's aligned. And with aligned, I mean that we as GRI work together with IFRS, that we work together with the jurisdictions, that they apply the same. Jurisdictions, I mean ESRS, and you have European Commission or SEC in US, or in Indonesia or in Brazil, that we use the same kind of terminology, requirements, which you have to report to. But remember, it's about transparency. It's not about ticking the box. That's the wrong start and the wrong approach. Look for the added value. And I see some nodding. So
yes, yeah. And the biggest added value then from transparency is?
Sorry?
If you're looking at the biggest benefit of transparency in your mind, what is it?
Well, the list I just gave.
If you were to pick one?
Well, I think it's beyond reporting. So it's making money, your business model.
Right. Okay. And presumably with transparency, that's also a means of avoiding surprises through supply chains and avoiding surprises that might, sometimes end up being kind of non-compliant. Thank you, everybody, for engaging with Slido so briskly. I appreciate that. I would actually like to ask a question to you, Harold, if I may, which is how do we, and from the perspective of GRI, how do we integrate planetary boundaries into existing reporting frameworks? That's a really hard question, but...
No, it's actually not, because we are somehow already doing that.
Okay.
So you may expect somehow, if you read very carefully through biodiversity standards, for instance, but also our pollution standard and pollution standards of ESRS, they already somehow started to apply these planetary boundary concepts. So you may expect a combination of this, combination of the latest authoritative references and also like IPPC, but also planetary boundaries concepts. A lot of these things you will see coming back in a little bit different way of requirements. You will see them coming back in the requirements of the most prominent, sustainable reporting voluntary mandatory standards.
And so if you're, as a company, adopting GRI reporting protocols, can you then have some comfort that, you are reporting in a way that's aligned with planetary boundaries?
Well, we want to create a guidance on that. It's always difficult to say. We do not say that you are, I say you very closely come to that, but it's always the auditor. Yeah. We always push for mandatory, so having assurance, go with an auditor to test it, because it's not up to us to judge that. But I would say, you can come quite an end there.
Great. So it's a good step in the right direction. Thank you very much. So thank you for reminding us why reporting is important, lest we forget, and amongst all the other pressures that we face. I'd now like to turn to Elena, if I may, and to supplement that answer around direct benefits of reporting. Just really lovely to hear what opportunities and indirect benefits have you seen in your organization from approaches to reporting. So you've been reporting, you've been disclosing. What are those indirect benefits that drive greater positive impact?
Well, thank you for the question. So first of all, I'm sorry if I may, EssilorLuxottica, just also to give a bit of a context, if you don't mind. I'm sure you know Ray-Ban as a sunglasses brand. or David Klulov. So basically, EssilorLuxottica is a leading eyewear designer, manufacturer, and distributor, and is around a 26 billion euro company present in 150 countries with 200,000 employees and around 600 manufacturing facilities, lens laboratories, and 18,000 stores in the world. I mentioned David Klulov, Sunglassat, and so on. So it's a vertically integrated company business model. And of course, you can imagine that when it comes to making sustainability, measuring what we're doing and reporting, it cannot be really a very easy task. So coming to your question, the opportunity was on creating more and more awareness on overall the sustainability, and especially on, let me say, engaging internally the different colleagues and teams that would have supported the overall collection of the data and the calculation of the different indicators. But one thing that I think is important to stress is the fact that reporting, and you were saying, fully aligned with you, cannot be seen as a compliance exercise per se, because then it becomes a missed opportunity. But if you make reporting as part of your making a sustainability, if you, for instance, in our case, we really used reporting to kind of further emphasize where we were with our Eyes on the Planet program. So to measure our progress against our commitments, this is, let me say, rewarding internally and fosters more and more the sustainability culture. But again, make it something that is meaningful for your organization. A key aspect here is that for us, for instance, it's important to make it part of the decision-making process as well. So when also looking at different indicators or different data, if the specific indicator is not meaningful for us, we're not really going to measure and disclose it because we prefer to have something that makes sense also for our own decision making and push, therefore, our sustainability strategy and go with that.
Okay, so can you maybe give us an example of that internal engagement
Sure.
piece? When you kind of think about those benefits of reporting in terms of internal engagement, give us an example of something that you saw happen that you were like, that's great, that's really helped the business.
Yeah, for instance, I believe a great example is more on, around circularity, for instance, measurement of circularity. But honestly, I have to say that at the beginning, we were not, and I'm talking of some years ago, we were not really looking that much at circularity. So because also of these reporting requirements, we started more and more not just to look at circularity as a big topic, but more as activating projects. So we started from the core of our organization, from our operations, and we started to look at the material of our frames to say, okay, what are we doing there? Or still in the processing, in the manufacturing processes, what are we doing with the water? And then it's not just a matter of reducing the consumption of water. It's also a matter, for instance, of investing in closed circuit loops. And therefore, again, incentivizing more and more better control of our water management as well. So many initiatives actually have been accelerated, I have to say, because overall sustainability was already part of the company's DNA. But probably also this kind of obligation to report and to disclose more externally put also different teams in a condition of saying, well, you know what? This is a cool thing because we can give visibility to the many different things and projects that we want to pursue. And so it has also accelerated in many cases. Also, it has created also new teams as well.
Great, thank you very much. And then, Andrew, the same question to you. What benefits have you seen within your organization even? And tell us a bit more about your organization, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I work for Perfetti Van Melle. We are a family-owned Italian confectionery company, one of the largest in the world, the second largest chewing gum producer. You probably know the brands more than the family name itself. So Mentos, Chupa Chups, Smint, Frutella are all big brands in the UK, but we have a number of global and regional brands which are also very popular. privately owned company, so I loved it when CSRD was announced, unlike many CSOs, because it gave me a real chance to focus the minds of the family and the board on what are really material topics for Perfetti. So we weren't voluntarily disclosing, we weren't producing nice sustainability reports every year. All of a sudden, 2 years ago, we have to do this. So we had the benefit of a blank sheet almost. We had our own existing targets and metrics, but now through the framework, we've managed to agree the real material topics. And there were some new topics appeared for HR, for procurement, things which in the past they would not have considered on their table. So it's been a challenge the last year in particular to agree those topics, but now they're aligned. And importantly, I have owners for each of the topics in the functions. So I don't own the reporting agenda. It's owned by finance. I don't own any of the topics, in fact. I managed to delegate them all to procurement, HR, manufacturing. And I think that's important. They need to see the need for this. And they are different in different functions and maturity, but they're owning it now, and they realize this is something they can get to grips with within their own functions, which has been a big change in the mindset of the company.
And what do you think triggered that shift in mindset over and above the fact you had to do it? I mean, how did you go about engaging with these different departments to get them excited?
Once the legislation was announced, that was the trigger for me to start organising internal workshops, discussions with all the functions. We had the framework of this is CSRD, the standards, to explain what the topics are. So just having that discussion, some of these were new, completely new areas. So it took us ages in some cases to explain to the owners what the topics were and why they were important. We did have SBTIs also I managed to bring into the fold, which is not compliance, but increasingly expected. Mm-hmm. So to get agreement on those targets took a lot of understanding for people who didn't know what Scope 3 were, didn't know how to measure the emissions of a product like ours, which is very much driven by the upstream supply chain. So there's a whole awareness and training which came as part of it. I think that's really helped the board and the family understand much more about what it means behind the word sustainability.
And do you think that they've begun to understand the opportunity of this agenda, or do you think it's a sort of risk mitigation exercise?
It's a balance. There are one or two. We're a very innovative company. We're very innovative. We introduce lots of new products quickly into different markets. So the family and the board have seen, thinking, okay, if this is an area for us of interest or impact, how can we think about innovating around that and trying out new product types? So some of you may have seen our Chupa Chups lollipops now. They have paper sticks, not plastic sticks. Not just because it's required in certain markets, but because there's a sustainability benefit in doing that. So in the product innovation side, it's led to some new ideas, and there'll be more to come, I'm sure.
Great, thank you very much. Jay, would love you to share a bit more about your organisation, Gravity. My question for you is, we know that collecting and analysing data can be a heavy lift. Would love you to shine a light on, how technology can help us with that, and that's probably sort of linked into what Gravity does. But over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. I mean, well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation and to join all of you. Excited for the conversation. And just very briefly, I'm Jay, a co-founder of Gravity, and we're a carbon and energy management platform, so helping companies with the measurement and disclosure piece, but also implementing projects to actually reduce emissions. And both of those, I think, pillars kind of track the two ways we think about software helping when it comes to disclosure. So one is just easier, more efficient measurement and disclosure, but the other is actually enabling insight and proactive project implementation, part and parcel of the disclosure action. So just on the former, easier, better disclosure, software's come a long way. It can now really help with the unstructured data, messy challenges that I know all of you will be familiar with and that have been bedeviling sustainability teams and other teams for a really long time. But gone are the days where you're going to have to read utility bills or sort of shoehorn data into templates until your eyes, glaze over and you feel like pulling your hair out and question the day's work. But the best of modern software can really meet data where it is, unstructured, structured, and take a lot of that lift off, which is nice. Qualitative answers as well. I mean, so much of the work that GRI is doing along in partnership with the other frameworks has been helpful to kind of harmonize the qualitative answers side of things, but there's still a little bit of, Venn diagram overlap across the frameworks. And so enabling teams to leverage their policies and at least take a first crack at repeating some of the answers across the frameworks has been helpful. But I think maybe more interesting is enabling the kind of proactive embedding of intelligence and insight into the disclosure process itself. I think disclosure reporting, these are means to an end ultimately to actually implement projects and decarbonize. But we have seen a lot of teams get kind of stuck in a linear sequence of measurement and then reporting and then, oh, it's time for measurement again and then reporting. And where's the proactive progress? And I think it's a shame because the ESG data for reporting is also financial data, is also operational data. It's the data you need to actually implement projects and yield some insight. And so I think that's really where the magic of connecting those dots can come in and not just saying, your Birmingham facility, let's measure the emissions from the electricity and the utility usage, but to say, hey, it looks like you used 100,000 kilowatt hours of electricity last month. You'd be a great candidate for demand response. Here's the vendor in your area that you can work with, and just being a bit more sort of insightful and crucial to value creation angle as well. And so I guess to round out in that sense, the evolution of software and technology for sustainability teams has kind of mirrored the evolution of the sustainability function itself within companies. So moving from compliance, as was mentioned, to something more proactive, core integration into value creation purpose of the mission of the company and innovation as well.
Thank you. And I've got to ask, to what degree do you use AI in your platform?
Yeah, I tried to avoid it, saying that it
I had to ask, I'm sorry.
No, it's important. And I know my chief technology officer would be upset I didn't mention it already, but break out the buzzword bingo cards. We use it a lot. So those kind of data parsing capabilities I mentioned, we use AI to scan unstructured documents, make it so you don't have to use spreadsheet templates, that kind of thing. And then on the sort of project execution side as well, so matching to the closest vendor, forming relationships that way helps a lot.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to the questions from the audience, and we've got two questions that are tying for top place. I'm going to go for the one that is, most businesses own a report on sustainability if required to do so by regulation, and regulation is retreating. What does the panel see for the future? Who'd like to have a stab at this? I can start us off if you like, only because I was at a conference yesterday in Paris where this was the sole topic of conversation. And actually, I was with EcoVadis. They have an annual gathering in Paris, and very much the tenor of the conversation was that actually the business case for reporting and disclosure hasn't gone away, and any business that's really keen on kind of mitigating risk but maximizing opportunity, the regulation was helpful, but actually it wasn't the be all and the end all. And there was a great quote from a very well-known brand yesterday that said, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance, particularly if you've got really complex supply chains. So I think the general sense from the conversation in Paris yesterday at Sustain was actually we will carry on. There'll be some organizations that, were doing it because they didn't really see the benefits in terms of the way you've all described. They might slow down. Yep. But that was the sense from Paris yesterday. What is the sense from London this afternoon?
Sense from London. We're still waiting to see. My mantra at the moment is this hasn't been agreed yet. Some may assume it's coming and that there's a delay, particularly as I work for a privately owned company, we would report next year for the first time. That may be deferred now by 1 or 2 years. But I'm telling my team and internally we carry on this year with the plan, because whether you have to disclose for regulation reasons, our customers still want to know what are your priorities, what are you doing on these topics, our employees and others. There are other stakeholders beside the regulators who benefit from us having a structured report, because as I said earlier, we don't have a structured voluntary report, so there are benefits for us beyond the regulation. So We had it with the EUDR last year as well. For those who know, that regulation in Europe has been postponed by a year, but we still got ready for EUDR. You can't put it down the line and assume you've got an extra year or two. My view is get on with it, keep going if you can.
And you've also answered then a very specific question, which is, has your CSRD preparation been adversely affected by the omnibus? And it's a resounding
no,
not really.
We're planning to report next year.
Yeah.
We're doing a dummy report this year, even ahead of 26, so I'll be driving that as hard as I can.
Great. And of course, it is important to remember this is just a recommendation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so
it's not there yet.
We can't draw any. But I'd love to hear other people's views.
I'm a little controversial on this, which is like, important to contextualize a disclosure or reporting regulation for what it is, which is transparency, which is, again, not itself the decarbonization. And so a narrowed disclosure regulatory environment doesn't mean a narrowed ambition among companies, and a requirement to make them disclose emissions isn't always the most compelling reasons for the CFO to say, yep, we're going to actually implement this project. And so when it comes to the business case and making sure there's an ROI out of the decarb, like that's going to stand no matter what happens with the proposal.
Fully aligned. Honestly, also for us, what matters first is the execution of the sustainability strategy. Then, of course, the overall reporting, the regulation is a tool, as you were saying, in the end, to support the reporting per se, the measurements, the identification of the indicators, having a more structured risk analysis as well, which is super important. But overall, we will continue to make and measure.
And of course, the information is asked for. So when we started 28 years ago already now, so over 15,000 companies are reporting to this. And you could say it's starting as a voluntary basis, but basically because stakeholders need this information.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, you don't have a competitive advantage. So the top 10,000 of the world, it's just a no-brainer. Of course, in Europe, smaller companies, what we will see now, and in the supply chain, then of the 50,000, the other 40,000, they are in a little bit in doubt, and because it's also competition, level playing field. That's understandable. But it's a point of no return, I would say, because a lot of people already saw, and then more people now see the benefit of measuring, reporting, the cycle of improving, measuring again, and seeing the benefits of doing this.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. The question was framed as retreat of regulation. Again, there's a view which is this is not necessarily, the omnibus isn't necessarily a retreat, it's a recalibration. So this was the first attempt to bring in legislation that really raised the level of disclosure to try and enable environmental, social data to be at the same standard as financial data. It would be amazing if it worked perfectly the first time round. So maybe we also need to shift the narrative a little bit. It's maybe not so much a retreat as a recalibration. You heard it here first. So we have got 4 minutes left to go, and I would like to put each of you on notice for one final question, and it needs to be really short, but I'm going to give you advance notice before I go back to Slido. My final question to the four of you is, what excites you most about the power of reporting? You're on notice. We are going to go back to Slido. Are you aware of any upcoming UK standards for ESG reporting?
The FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, has something in the works, I think.
Yeah.
But not an expert there. Yeah.
What is the UK? They have the UK comparable CSRD, you would say. So that's
nothing in addition to that.
No, they're implementing the IFRS combination, SASBs, and we then also say, well, from a double materiality perspective, then also look at the GRI standards. So it's a combination of things. It's very much aligned, I would say, very general to what you see.
That was my understanding too. And then I guess a question for Andrew and Elena, again, really quickly. Which challenges did you encounter in reporting that you weren't expecting? So set off on the journey. What happened that maybe you weren't expecting? Andrew?
I was expecting, I had assumptions about certain parts of the business where they would want to be involved and not, and it wasn't always obvious that the people you thought were most
Oh, that's interesting.
serious about sustainability. Previously, we're not the ones who were jumping forward saying, can I report on this or this? Whereas some of the newer owners of the topics were actually saying, finally, I've got a reason. I know why this is important. I can move with this because no one's really explained to me before why my part of the business is important. Yeah.
So check your assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Elena?
The big challenge was on the amount of narrative, amount of qualitative information to be provided. I was not used to that. I mean, I was used to the storytelling, the nice part, but the narrative regulated in that way was I was not expecting that.
Okay. So we now need to come to the last question to all of you. And I have also been listening very hard, and I have generated a 6-point plan to maximize the value of reporting here. It spells impact, by the way. Quite pleased with this one. But really quickly, what excites you, Andrew, most about reporting?
Engaging the whole of the business from the top right through to the people on the shop floor, so they know why we're in the sustainability business.
Why wouldn't you want to do that? Elena?
Pretty much the same, creating the culture and demonstrating the value of what we're doing.
Perfect. Harold?
Well, maybe if transparency helps you to understand somebody in Mongolia, somebody in Canada, somebody in Australia, if you talk about certain aspects, scope 1, scope 2, that you all understand each other, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just on a voluntary basis.
Nice. Yeah, so a common language. Yeah. And Jay?
I think the opportunity and maybe even mandate that sustainability teams have to show the alignment between their work and business impact, profitability concerns, and sort of the core nature of the business and how these are deeply integrated.
Brilliant. Thank you. And so to summarize then, 6 ways in which reporting can drive meaning. That was the title of this session. I is for internal engagement. We've heard that loud and clear. I sort of made this up a little bit, but what you've all described is kind of moving from analysis to actually action. So cheated a little bit. I couldn't quite think of the perfect M. But P is for purpose, because be clear about why we're doing this. It's not just a reporting exercise in of itself. It has broader benefits. A is for awareness raising. You've talked about that, the ability of reporting to drive awareness raising within an organization. C, I was struggling with until you talked about the lollipop sticks for Chupa Chups. C is for catalyst for product innovation. And then T, thank you, Harold, is for transparency as a route to driving broader business value creation. So there are 6 ways in which reporting can allow us to move from metrics to meaning. It spells impact, and we're totally at time. You're amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you, the audience. And we need to hand over.
Well done.